I'm an American standing in Moscow, Russia, where I've lived for the past 3 years. And on this channel, I want to give you an idea of what life is really like in Russia. But since I've been here for a while, I think it's time that I ask someone who is fresh off the boat. This is Philip. He's only been here for 3 months. And I want to get his fresh perspective of this country and his perspective of his country that he just came from. What is the UK like today? What is Russia like now? Welcome to EXPAT American. I am the EXPAT American. Come with us and hear his story.
The things that I learn on a daily basis that is so much more positive towards many different aspects of life than I've ever experienced in the UK or pretty much anywhere else that I've lived in the world.
Hello, sir. Good to see you. Am I using the right hand?
Yeah.
Philip.
Joe.
Who are you?
Who am I? So I'm from the United Kingdom, from England. I grew up in the county of Essex, just outside of London.
Oh wow, fantastic. So you were near enough to be familiar with the city, but you still got to have not the dense city life.
Yeah, so it's kind of in the countryside. It's nice, but yeah, 30 minutes from the city. I started a business in the UK. You know, things used to be quite good in the UK. You know, things started deteriorating quite a lot to the point where I thought, you know what, the UK perhaps isn't for me anymore. Decided to look for other options, moved to Hong Kong, spent a good 5 years out in Asia running recruitment businesses between Hong Kong, Singapore and mainland China. And of course the pandemic hit. A lot of the expats and Westerners that were based in Hong Kong were moving to one or two places, either Singapore or Dubai. Those were sort of the two places that kept coming up. And I chose Dubai.
Interesting. So you weren't necessarily searching for Russia or coming after Russia. You were first becoming disillusioned with Britain, with England, with London, which is like the historical crown jewel of the West, and you did not appreciate it. You were searching for a new home.
Exactly. So Russia was never on my radar. And then something quite interesting happened, and I ended up meeting, she's my wife now, but ended up meeting back then obviously a Russian woman who then became my girlfriend, and then obviously my wife very recently, obviously last October. But we met in 2019. Just before the whole world went into lockdown. Yeah, literally before the pandemic. We actually met online, although I thought at the time she was based in the UK because her profile said London on it, because she used to study in the UK for many years and just never updated it. So it's quite funny actually, because when I was living out in Asia, she also was living out in Asia because she was living in Singapore for a little bit, and I was traveling there quite a lot, but we never crossed paths out there. And there was one time when I was taking an Aeroflot flight from the UK to Asia that had a connecting flight in Shoremitova, and I was sat there in the lounge playing around with the apps on my phone. I matched with my now wife.
Oh, wow.
And we started chatting.
Okay, so she's the one who turned you on to Russia.
So she's the one that turned me on to Russia for sure. You know, we were talking for a bit. That particular trip, I was back in Asia for about a week. I then travelled back to the UK, and throughout that whole time we were still chatting, we'd had a few calls, etc. And obviously I realised she was in Russia, I was in the UK, because at that time I had actually decided to go back to the UK following my time in the UAE. And when I realised she was in Russia, I said, right, you know what, I'm going to go to the embassy, get a visa, and I'm going to take you on a first date next week.
Wow.
So that's pretty much what I did. So I came back to Russia.
So how many years were you just vacationing in Russia? Like in what increments and for how long?
Yeah, so we met in 2019 in December, just before Christmas. So it was literally at that point before the new year when obviously the borders completely shut down. So for about 6 months we had no option but to video call. Our whole life was online because Russia, I don't know if you know at that time, but the borders were completely shut. You couldn't come in and you couldn't go out. You know, it was impossible. You know, the UK also had a similar thing. I managed to get, well, 6 months later when Russia opened the borders, technically the UK was still in lockdown. I had to get special permission, sort of business permission, if you like, to leave the country. So the second that I could, though, you know, went to the airport with my sheet of paper that allowed me to leave. Crazy times we lived in, for sure. But Russia was my next stop. I got in, managed to spend some time together. I went back. We were then vacationing a bit in the Maldives and Dubai, because those were basically the only two places, and Turkey, only three places that Russians were sort of allowed to go at that point.
So you were forced to only meet in luxury vacation spots for a few years.
Yeah,
it's a hard life.
Yeah, unless we wanted to always meet in Moscow. But I'll be honest, there was a point where I don't speak Russian. I was coming here a lot. My wife was feeling very frustrated, like she was the translator at pretty much every restaurant we went to. And we just decided that actually trying to meet up outside of Russia for that period was a good thing to do, because it doesn't put all the pressure on her all the time. Yeah. So we did that. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I was in a fortunate position to be able to do that at the time. You know, and yeah, things were good. And we decided in 2023 that we'd base ourselves out of Dubai, because knowing what the UK was like, it was going to be easier for her to go there and get a visa, me to be located there. But it was increasingly difficult to manage a UK business remotely from Dubai, given its property development and what we were sort of involved with. The UK, I could see, was continuing to go more and more downhill. And I was pretty heavily at that time involved with the Conservative and Unionist Party as well, politically. So I had this big vision of going back to the UK and trying to change the world. So I said, right, okay, how do we do that? Investigated, and there was, marriage visas, and I knew that I wanted to propose to my now wife at that point. So I thought, you know what, let's get that out the way, and then we can apply officially for the marriage visa to obviously go to the UK, get married within 6 months. So that's what we did. So last October, we got married in Westminster in London.
Wow. And
the plan was then to convert that to a spousal visa. And obviously, we all know about the special military operation and the ongoings in Ukraine. That obviously had a big influence over her status. And at that point, there was a change of government. We, of course, had the general election the back end of 2024. And we had this visa pending, and it just wasn't coming back. And we inquired and no one knew anything. And then Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, we get this email through from the Home Office, basically saying, look, we're rejecting the visa, pretty much every possible ground possible. They make up this spiel of, look, we can't tell you the full reason why, but it hasn't met this criteria or that criteria. Generally, it's because she's Russian and Kier Starmer and the Labour Party. I don't want to get too political, but historically had an even more negative stance on Russia than the previous party. And I think it was a politically motivated move to reject that visa, effectively giving her 28 days to leave. They came out with some outrageous statements like, in this modern world, there's modern forms of communication, so your husband's welcome to stay in the UK, you can go back to Russia and you can maintain your relationship remotely. However, we can see from Philip's travel history that he's been many times to Russia, so he'll integrate seamlessly into Russian society should he decide to do so.
Oh, wow. Hint, hint, get out of here.
Exactly.
So how many days would you guess you spent in Russia before you actually decided to move here?
8 trips, between 1 and 2 weeks each.
Okay.
So, a fair amount of time
so you had a good idea of what the country's
to have
like.
a good idea of what to expect. It's not like I moved here completely blindly.
Right. And so how long have you been here now?
About 3 months now.
3 months.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So still
fresh off the boat.
Exactly.
Do they still use boats to come here?
I don't think so. Just kidding.
There are a lot of people that watch this channel that are thinking about moving, and what should they be aware of as far as paperwork, notarizing things, SIM cards, all that stuff?
Apparently, there's about 150 people a month at the moment from the EU, United States, and Australia, basically other friendly countries, immigrating here each month. Obviously, the 702 visa has prompted that. You know, people effectively saying, look, I'm fed up with the way the country's being run, I'm fed up with the woke culture of the Western society, I share traditional Russian values, let's move there and try something different. Me personally, I could have had a few different routes into Russia. I could have applied under the spousal visa because we were married at that point. A lot of people question why I didn't do that, but the reason why is because under the 702 scheme, you can apply for the temporary residence permit and you don't have to take the language exam or the laws or history exam anymore to obtain the TRP. So as someone that doesn't speak Russian, I thought, you know, great, because I didn't really want to be moving here, not having proper status here, and going years and years without having a, you know, official residency. And then of course, after 3 years of holding the TRP, you can then upgrade that to a permanent residency. And if you do in between that have a child, you can then obviously get that again without taking the language exam. Talking about, you know, documentation and all of that kind of stuff, it's a lot. it's really hard, really difficult. I would have struggled if I didn't have a Russian wife helping me. I didn't really know, you know, at the time too much about it. I mean, my wife pretty much helped me probably too much with pretty much everything. A lot of the paperwork that you need to fill out is in Russian. You know, the immigration centre where you've got to do the medical and everything, I wouldn't have had a clue. It obviously all starts at the embassy in your home country. So you simply have to write into the embassy and say, look, I'd like to apply for a visa under whatever scheme it is. In my case, it was the 702 scheme.
Right.
And they get back to you, give you an interview at the embassy. The ambassador makes a decision whether or not to approve you for that visa, and you get on a plane and come here. And then obviously when you arrive, you then have 3 months to go through the process of obtaining that TRP. So getting together all of the paperwork, getting your police report notarized, well, getting pretty much everything notarized in terms of the, you know, the passport, birth certificate. We did get a marriage certificate notarized as well, just because we are married. We didn't actually need that for that scheme. And then once you've gathered all the documentation, you have to get your medical.
Now, I think it's important for people to know, because I'm an American who went through this, you're a British guy who went through this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of paperwork that you need to get while you're in your homeland.
That's
you
true.
need to get it together, you need to get it notarized and apostilled and whatnot, and then bring the originals with you, correct? Is it the same for you?
Yeah, that's correct. So I think in the US you have to get the State Department or FBI to generate the
background check. Yeah.
The background check. In the UK, it's the ACRO police office that generate effectively a police report, and then it's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK that apostille those documents. And we just got, to be on the safe side, we just got everything apostilled. So, you know, birth certificate, marriage certificate, you know, passport, literally the whole bundle of documents apostilled. We went to the embassy because we didn't really know at the time if we needed anything further. Pay the embassy a load of money. They also notarized the documents. It turned out in the end we didn't actually need the stamp from the embassy in terms of the Russian embassy. So we had to kind of redo that when we came here. Just a bit of a learning curve, I guess.
Right. Now, what about the SIM card? I've heard a lot of immigrants coming to Russia complaining recently that this extra layer that you have to go through if you're getting a SIM card is a hassle. Tell us about that. Do you have one? Is it a problem for you?
So the SIM cards can, well, it obviously is an issue, especially people coming here short term, you know, tourists coming in for a week, because, you know, normally when I travel somewhere, I like to land at the airport, go to a little counter and get a tourist SIM card, and it's obviously the best way to travel, really, isn't it? But you can't do that anymore. There is a process. The president signed a decree last year to limit the amount of SIM cards one can hold. So if you're a foreigner, it's 5. If you're a citizen, it's 10. And to obtain a SIM card, you need to first register for a SNILS number and a Goseslugi. Now, as you know, Goseslugi is the government portal, so anything to do with the government systems, even the banking systems, if you get a job here, your salary, your tax, everything is going through that system. So obviously the SNILS numbers all tied into that. You've got to go to a local pension fund office. So there's a few dotted around Moscow. Wherever you're based, you just basically Google the nearest one and it will come up sort of where you need to go to. And then that gets issued, and then you've got to get your biometrics done. Normally that's done wherever you open a bank account. So Sberbank, for example, did mine, and then you basically take all that documentation to, or not documentation as such, but the number and things that you've had generated to the mobile provider's office. So Beeline, for example, is one of the major ones out here, and they can issue it. Me personally, I didn't do that straight away because it was just a bit of a pain. Because I have a Russian wife, she just got one in her name and assigned me as the holder of that, and I got it instantly.
So in that case, it was easier for you.
Yeah, so if you've got a Russian wife and you're here with her, then she can get it for you and put your name against it under her account, and it still pops up as your name for banking and all that kind of stuff, but it's just easier to get it instantly. And then once I had a Goseslugi and a SNILS, I then contacted the phone provider and transferred that across so it appears on my account when I log in.
Now, Russians watch this show and they're curious what Westerners think of their country, and Westerners watch this show and they're curious, what is it really like in Russia? And I know that we're all hearing international news, and we know that Russia's been under thousands of sanctions by the West for years. So what are the sacrifices that you have to go through in moving to a sanctioned country? What are you technically missing out on a regular basis because you left the West and you've come to sanctioned Russia?
I have. Thing is, look, people have concerns about me coming here, right? So generally people have concerns because the Western media, the Western propaganda has one line that they've chosen to take with Russia, which is Russia's the bad guy, Russia is bad, Russian people are bad, everything to do with Russia is bad. And obviously that gets into people's heads and effectively brainwashes them, because when they're hearing that every day, they think, oh, why do you want to go there? Isn't it a war zone? Isn't it dangerous? But I knew that the reality was somewhat different, because obviously I've been coming here, and even after the military operation started, I did come to Russia, and I have been here as a tourist, as a visitor after that point. Now, what I would say to everyone watching is that you should come here and experience it for yourself, because it's absolutely nothing like it's portrayed in the Western media. There isn't really, I would say, anything that I'm missing out on here in Russia. There's nothing that you can't, I would say, access. You go into the supermarket, you can find pretty much everything you need. Even local brands like Stars Coffee have taken over Starbucks, for instance, but it's pretty much Starbucks. They've just put their own twist on it. But what I would say is, arguably, the Russian brands that have come in to take over and the quality of the products you can get in Russia are actually far superior to what you can get in the West. Say tomatoes, for example. I regularly go to the local market and buy some Uzbek tomatoes. They're the tastiest tomatoes I've ever tasted in my life. The quality of what you can get here, especially things like food, tends to be very, very, very good. But equally, you don't really miss out on much at all. I mean, when it comes to the safety aspects, it's not war-torn Russia. It's quite the opposite. It's business as usual. We're sat here today with St. Basil's Cathedral behind us, with a run that's been on, people out enjoying themselves. We're in a park. People don't talk about what's going on hundreds or thousands of miles away in the border towns. And I'm sure there are things going on in some of these towns that would be considered dangerous, but when you're talking about the big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, where most people come to, especially for their first point of entry into the country, there isn't really any, or there shouldn't be any worries at all. I mean, I can go where I want, I can do what I want, I can go out pretty much any time of night. My wife can do that as well as a woman. You know, you're comparing that to places like London, where you can't even, you know, put your phone to your ear without the worry that someone's going to come and snatch it from your hand. Right. You know, people are out of control, and I'm not sure about the US, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, it's
similar to the UK right now, unfortunately. What do you think is the cultural difference or similarity between the UK and Russia?
I'd say it's very, very different. It's very family orientated. So, you know, everything's about, you know, about family, about being there for each other, about doing things for each other. You know, Russians, especially when you get to know them, they're very, very loyal. Yes, there's certain topics here that are frowned upon, but I don't believe personally that's a bad thing, and I don't think a lot of people in the Western countries think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that foundationally these cultures are pretty much the same, but over time, you know, Russia has stuck with traditional family values, and the West, the UK, US, they're experimenting with getting away from that. And I think it's obvious to me by now that that experiment is not working, and it's like the emperor has no clothes situation, you know, and everyone's saying it's fine, you know, he's not naked, that's a beautiful suit he's wearing, it's just invisible, you know. It's apparent to anyone with common sense things are not working in the US, things are not working in the UK, and I think that's why, you know, they want to shut off the news. They don't want people to see Russia where traditional family values are working.
It was very much a case, wasn't it, that it's a lot more conservative in the world. It was a case of, you know, the man goes to work and provides for the family, you know, the woman brings up the kids. That was always the case. I mean, if you go back, you know, to even my parents' generation and beyond, we've got lost in a way and started going down a completely different path. And of course it started in the US. The UK is basically a puppet or whatever the US starts, unfortunately. And what I would say is thank God for Trump coming in and starting to put his foot down on some of these.
Maybe. What do your friends and acquaintances in the UK think about what you've done? Have you gotten any sense from them?
I mean, my parents, for example, haven't really, I mean, they haven't been negative about coming here because they know my wife, obviously, over many years. Right. So I've got to learn a lot more about Russia and the Russian culture and what life is actually like here. And obviously we tell them what life is like here. They're still a little bit skeptical about coming to Russia themselves. They haven't, you know, come here yet, and probably won't until a peace deal is agreed in Ukraine. I can't see that happening, which is sad, you know, really. And you know, I've potentially lost friends over coming here, and get the odd comment that, you know, they can't condone me effectively funding the economy in Russia, etc. And yeah, I mean, that's just too sad, really. If people are going to be as closed-minded as that, you know, I mean, I just can't see why we're a country in the UK, and the US is the same, you know, giving billions and billions of dollars every year to a country thousands of miles away, when we've got our own problems to worry about. You know, there's people starving in the street, they can't feed their families, they can't afford to heat their homes. Why is Kier Starmer agreeing to give £3 billion a year for the next 100 years? You know, I think that's a bad move. It's not one at all that I agree with, and I think a lot of people are having that same sort of sentiment in the UK and the US about those sorts of decisions with their tax money, because of course the tax rate is much higher. I mean, you're talking half your income going to the government. Perhaps that would be okay if I saw the return on investment for my money. But when you look at the public services and, you know, the NHS and people waiting, you know, 2-3 years to get in for an operation, for example, you know, what use is that? Right.
Well, I mean, to wrap it up, because you said you were interested in and passionate about British politics, what do you see that needs to change in Britain for things to get better?
Actually sorting out immigration policies that work for the country. So, taking my wife for an example, she studied in the UK, paid a lot of money to go to university in the UK over many years, speaks the language perfectly, has friends there, has family there, completely what I would call integrated into British society, British culture. So she's the sort of person they're currently saying, no, we don't want, we're going to boot you out of the country. Yet, if she went across to France and hopped into a little dinghy,
wow,
and came across on a boat and
point.
said, look, I'm an illegal immigrant,
right,
then we would have said, no problem, ma'am. Here's a 5-star hotel, here's a monthly subsidy, you know, and literally treated like a VIP. These people normally can't speak English, don't want to integrate, have no interest really in working or contributing to the society. They segregate into areas of the country. If you want to go somewhere, at least contribute to the place that you're going to. And then when you put the perfect candidate up against some of these people coming in, it doesn't even compare. So you need to get to the fundamental issue of sorting out those problems and actually, like, you know, allowing good people into the country, but people aren't going to contribute, get rid of them, because that's the reason we can't get doctor's appointments in the UK. You call a doctor, they'll tell you to come back in 4 weeks. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, if you need treatment, you need treatment now. You're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna want to obviously wait all of that time. And if you take out that proportion of people, then, you know, you're gonna find that public services run a lot more efficiently. We obviously need to look at how we're spending money. The whole system is corrupt, really. And I've said this time and time again within politics and to, you know, very high profile politicians, and I get shut down, I get cancelled. People don't want to even talk about some of these topics as to where money's going from out of the public purse. And I think when you sort these issues out, you finally start to rebuild the economy, because a bit like the US is doing at the moment with Doge and, you know, looking into actually where is
their border,
you know, where is the money going, where is it going, because it's, you know, so many stupid schemes and stupid things that money gets spent on.
So lastly, Philip, what are the next 50 years of your life going to be? What does your future look like? What are your plans, broadly speaking?
We'll continue a future in Russia, obtain my permanent residency and my citizenship here in Russia. I've started gauging a bit of interest since I've been here in terms of, you know, my online presence. Of course, I've got the YouTube channel I've just started. Obviously.
Yes, we're going to go there next.
Exactly. Nowhere is as big as yours, and I'll be lucky, I think, if I ever get there. But, you know, I feel honoured to be asked to come onto your show, and, you know, really thanks for having me.
You're going to raise Russian children here.
That is the plan. I think it will happen, and like I say, you know, the system here makes it very easy for people to come here, have children, get permanent residency and citizenships. The government even gives you 800,000 rubles. I didn't know until much recently. Your first child, 800,000 rubles. Well, that's incredible. The UK, I think, gives like £50 a month or something in support. The government here gives you like 70,000 rubles a month for 3 years, plus a lump sum of 800,000. They treat you so well, and they have a lot of support to help encourage young families to grow up here. I mean, even things like, you know, you can get a family mortgage here now, you know, where normally it's 25-30%. If you have children, it's 6% up for the first 12 million, which is quite interesting. I'm finding all this stuff out now because, you know, I'm looking at settling properly and buying a house and going through this whole process at the moment, and it's so interesting to me.
Right. Thanks for talking to me, Philip.
Of course. Thank you.
Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this interview. Now it's your turn to comment and let us know what you think of this guy. Philip and I have both decided to live here. If you're Russian, hopefully you're okay with that, and hopefully we will contribute to Russian society. Also, like and subscribe. Click the share button right now. Interrupt my speech, send this video to your friends. Click the box to see what happens next, which is going to be a video on his channel. So I want you guys to come on over. His link is below, and see me and him doing something completely different right now. Sound good?
Sound good.
Let's do it. Christoph, let's go. Wow, so nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. Is it yours?
I'm just me.
Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, it looks very classic. So cool. Wow.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Спасибо.